In my quest to watch a movie every day in 2025, I thought it might be fun to once a week take a look back at a classic film that I had never seen before on a big anniversary. Well, this is the 30th anniversary of one of Leonardo DiCaprio's earliest films, one of the ones that really cemented his status as a hot up-and-coming star. Let's talk The Basketball Diaries. Guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my movie review for The Basketball Diaries. We're going to take a deep dive into this film that I had not seen until recently, but I certainly remembered when it was out. I was a senior in high school. It was, kind of a hot movie with this hot up-and-coming star, Leo DiCaprio. We knew him from the last season of Growing Pains at that point. And he did already have an Oscar nomination under his belt for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which was a fantastic movie. Again, one I did not see when it was out. I saw that many, many years later, probably about 20 years after it came out. But I have seen that since. But yes, The Basketball Diaries, I knew the soundtrack was a hot number. It had Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and all these cool hip bands in the mid-90s. PJ Harvey was on it. But some classic stuff as well, including The Doors and Jim Carroll himself, who is the character Leonardo DiCaprio plays in this film. He was a musician, and he has a couple of songs on the soundtrack as well. So, look, we'll talk about all this here in just a second. First, though, let me welcome you back to Dan Reviews It. If you're a subscriber already, you probably know that most of my content focuses on newer stuff, movies and TV shows from the last year or two. But every so often, especially with this Watch a Movie a Day in 2025 project I've been doing, old movies have been popping up. In fact, I have done an older Leo movie as well that I had never seen called The Beach. Didn't love that one, but this is the 25th anniversary year of that, so I did a video for that, and some other fun ones. Pretty Woman I had never seen before, and Blood Simple, the first Coen Brothers movie, so there's a lot to check out there. But if you're not a subscriber to Dan Reviews It, please consider subscribing and click that notification bell too. That will alert you, of course, for all my new videos coming out. So look, I'm a huge Leo fan now. He's one of my favorite actors. For a time, he was my number one, but there have certainly been gaps along the way. Like I said, I'd never seen The Beach until recently, and this is one as well that, yes, I knew what it was at the time, but it was one that kind of blew past me, and I had never seen it. So this came out in on April 21st, 1995, which makes this, like I said, the 30th anniversary of the film. It grossed $2.4 million at the box office. That's it. This was an indie release. I don't know what the budget was on it. I couldn't find numbers on that, but I would imagine not too much. Pretty small cast of up-and-coming people that, some of them have become very famous since this film, DiCaprio certainly included. So as we do with these older films, I like to take kind of a deep dive into some casting what-ifs and some background on the film as well before we get to my review. So the only real casting note that I could find was that this was a big River Phoenix desire to play this character, this Jim Carroll. This was based on a real person, but it's based on his autobiography, which was also called The Basketball Diaries. So River Phoenix was rumored to maybe be playing Jim before Phoenix ended up dying, and he was the front runner. But though he was a huge fan of the book, by the time the movie was going to be made, he felt he was a little too old to be playing 15. He wanted to focus on, more adult type roles. And he had passed away by the time the film came out. But yes, even though he was sort of circling those rumors, it was never really meant to be. He had turned the role down by the time they were going to make the film. But the cast has worked together in other films. Juliette Lewis, another up-and-coming name in this movie. She worked with Leo in What's Eating Gilbert Grape right before this. And then another person who, he had a music career at the time, but certainly not an acting career, Mark Wahlberg. He was, part of Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, but this is one of his first film roles, and he ended up working later with Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, in The Departed. And they had some sort of synergy as well, DiCaprio and Wahlberg, because Leo was actually offered the lead role in Boogie Nights and ended up turning it down to take Titanic. I have not seen Boogie Nights. It is coming out, I think, around Christmas time this year on 4K. So I may actually finally, plunk down some money and watch Boogie Nights. I feel like I would really like it, based on what I know about it. But also, from what I know about it, I can't imagine Leo, doing the Dirk Diggler role, and vice versa. I don't know if Wahlberg was offered Titanic, but I can't see that either. But Jim Carroll at the time was unaware of who DiCaprio was. He said when they first told him that it was going to be Leo, didn't have a clue who he was, but he knew Growing Pains, and he said if they said it was the runaway kid from Growing Pains, then he would have known. Because when he saw Leo on that show, he said this kid has a lot of presence. He's very pretty. He's going to do well, and certainly, that came to be. But the director of this movie here, Scott Calvert, this was his feature debut, and he really has not done too many features. But before this, he was known for music videos. He did, listen to this list of people: Cyndi Lauper, Snoop Dogg, Bobby Brown, Taylor Dane, Samantha Fox, and yes, indeed, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. He directed 4 music videos for Marky Mark. So obviously there's the Wahlberg connection there. So he must have, championed him for this movie. But the screenwriter for this, Brian Goluboff, used to actually follow the real Jim Carroll around Greenwich in the 1980s when, they were both kind of teenagers and stuff. Carroll was a little bit older, maybe early 20s, but he was, just kind of playing music around the city. And so Goluboff kind of followed him around, and I guess, I don't know if he kept journals or whatever, but, this screenplay is sort of based on some of those memories along with, the book, The Basketball Diaries. And the aftermath of this movie is that this was one of the media subjects or media moments or whatever that was involved in a lawsuit shortly after a 1997 school shooting. A group of praying students was shot and killed by a 14-year-old, and an attorney who has been disbarred since filed this suit claiming that this film, as well as some video game companies, a couple of internet porn sites, and the movie Natural Born Killers were directly responsible for influencing the shooter. And of course, they tried that again a couple of years later with Columbine. They said, the music of Marilyn Manson and some of these other acts. That stuff obviously a bit hard to prove in court, but this case here was ultimately dismissed in 2001. But this was, now it's horrible, horrible, horrible. But we get a lot of school shootings. But back then that was a rare occurrence, and that one from 1997 was really one of the first big ones. And so it's easy to kind of attach some sort of blame to what the media is doing. And this movie, who knows, if it was even viewed by the shooter. It was such a small independent film. But of course, by the time that happened, this was out on video and all of that. So maybe. But in any event, that's kind of the background of this film. And so I've mentioned some of the stars already. We have the up-and-coming Juliette Lewis and Leo and Mark Wahlberg. But you also have a younger Lorraine Bracco, who, of course, would go on to many, many successes, including The Sopranos, but she plays Jim's mother in this. You also have Bruno Kirby, who was pretty hot at the time, doing the City Slickers movies and whatnot. He plays the coach. You have another Sopranos person, Michael Imperioli. He was in this. Michael Rappaport plays a skinhead, which is interesting because he played was he like a KKK member in another 1995 movie that I did for this very segment on my channel. These deep dives into classic movies. Higher Learning also came out in 1995 in January of that year. So within a few months, Rappaport had a couple of movies where he was playing, either a skinhead or a racist of some kind or whatever. And you also have Ernie Hudson here. Of course, he was a known actor at the time doing the Ghostbusters films and whatnot, but he has a small role here as well. So Jim Carroll is the Leo character and a real person, and this is basically his sort of story. But he wants to become a basketball star. He is really an up and coming star on the school team and everything. But he gets into a lot of mischief with his friends, Pedro, Mickey, and Neutron on the New York City streets. But he has this keen eye for the creative. He's interested in writing. He writes in this journal, which, ends up becoming poems, which ends up becoming these songs. But his best friend Bobby is dying of leukemia, and that is, looming large over his head. And after Bobby's death, Jim begins to, really spiral out with drugs, starts using heroin. And so this movie ends up sort of being, kind of a cautionary tale against drug use and what it looks like for a teenager to be using, and all of that sort of thing is covered here. So as for the review, look, this is obviously a very competent performance from Leo. I don't think it's as strong as his Arnie character in Gilbert Grape, and it's certainly not as nuanced as some of the characters he would play, in the years to come, like in This Boy's Life or Titanic even. But it is certainly a clear showing of what's to come in DiCaprio's career. You can certainly sense that there is star power here. Now, I will admit, I just recently went through the entire series of Growing Pains, probably about a year or two ago. And I watched it, here and there when it was on, but I never really sat down and just binged it from start to finish. And, by the final season, the Leo year of Growing Pains, the show was certainly long in the tooth. And I don't think, yes, he was, a very, very cute kid, obviously. But I don't know that I would have seen him and just been like, okay, this guy's got star power on him. Because, it's a kind of silly family sitcom and everything, even though he was playing a runaway character that had maybe a little more depth. But I don't know, watching it even now, I can't say I would have been like, oh, there's a star in the making. But movies like Gilbert Grape and like this certainly show off what he can do. And certainly what he has been able to do in the 30 years since. Especially with a more well-defined character. Not that this one is not, but it is definitely, a little bit, I don't know, stock in its portrayal, which, we can get into with some of the negatives. But the supporting cast ranges in quality here. There's, some are pretty good. Some maybe could use some help. But even Wahlberg, you can see what's to come here. And, look, overall, I like him a little bit less, I would say, than Leo. And I think a lot of the movies in the last maybe 10 years are fairly similar characters for Mark Wahlberg. But, for a while, he was definitely doing some different things on the screen, and maybe with some more, independent projects, or somebody like a Scorsese in The Departed directing him. I think he certainly, is showing some chops here that we would see later. The plot and themes, though, here's where the movie, I think, for me, falls apart a bit. They're kind of generic. And I sort of hinted at that with the Jim Carroll character. Yes, he is a well-defined character, and you see Leo really kind of trying to access some of that in his performance. But you have him in this movie where the themes are kind of generic. Yes, they're all wrapped in a grunge kind of bow, even though it takes place in the 80s, but that's why you have all these grunge artists on the soundtrack, Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and people that I mentioned. But it obviously takes place in the early 80s. So it's sort of like at odds with itself, in terms of its presentation, I feel like. In fact, a little bit more of a background here, but the production company wanted it to take place in Seattle, the movie studio. So, because Seattle was so hot in the early to mid 90s, they thought it might be more interesting. But the real story took place in New York City, so let's keep it there, right? Said the director. But it does seem to be a pretty realistic view on drug abuse, especially from teenagers. But I have to say, it's not anything that we haven't seen before in more well-rounded movies, in better written movies. And I would say that the biggest complaint I have about it, and this sort of goes hand in hand with the kind of grunge look and feel to the film, even though it took place 15 years before grunge was really a thing, is that, like a lot of the post-Pulp Fiction and MTV inspired movies, including Leo's own Romeo and Juliet that Baz Luhrmann directed, the bottom line is this movie is a lot of style over substance, which is kind of unfortunate. And I think you can tell just by watching it that this is not the work maybe of a filmmaker with his own style or anything like that. This is the work of, once I learned this guy did music videos, it all kind of fell into place. This is really the work of a music video director who is tasked with filming his first, movie as a director, full-length feature. There's a lot of quick shots, quick cuts. It is very MTV inspired, in that vein, and it makes sense. knowing that he did music videos, for all of these people, these pop stars, these rap stars, and what have you. And we see it here. So overall, look, for a really, really good performance from Leo and a pretty solid performance from Wahlberg, and for the authenticity, I think, of watching someone spiral into that drug abuse. I will leave this with a very slight positive. I give the Basketball Diaries a C plus. And I will say this is currently not streaming anywhere. I had to rent this one. But I'd always wanted to see it, so it was definitely worth, I think it was like $3.99 or something on Amazon. But as of now, this is not streaming anywhere. So if you are curious, you may have to plunk down a few bucks to check this out. Or I always like to remind people with some of these classic movies, your local library, they might have it there as well on DVD or Blu-ray. All right, so thank you for watching, and look forward to more of these classic reviews every week or two. I'm trying to get these up intermixed with my current movie and TV reviews as well. But thank you for watching Dave Reviews It. I'll see you next time. Bye.